So I think this is what's happened in the world today. Everybody wants to live for purpose. I think Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning was absolutely right about this, that when man lives with purpose and meaning, he thrives. But when he lives without purpose and meaning, he's just going to fall apart. He's going to commit suicide, whether literally or figuratively, he's going to commit suicide.
Should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? But in the end, one needs more courage to live than to kill himself. Wrote Albert Camus in 1936, he simply portrays his indifferent but subtly optimistic philosophy. I already made a video explaining Camus' philosophy, so for the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that you've watched it and understand it, but if not, the link to that video will be in the description. The quote starts off harsh, asking what Camus thought was the most fundamental question of philosophy, and then follows it up with the answer to that question. It isn't so clearly said here, but Camus thought the meaning of life is whatever you're doing that is preventing you from killing yourself. So if you ask the question, should I kill myself, and then go drink a cup of coffee, the meaning of life at that point is that cup of coffee you are drinking, because without that coffee, where would you be if not dead? It takes more courage to live than to not, because once man fully realizes the nature of his existence, that it being a contradiction, he's faced with the question of whether or not life is worth living, and will find more reasons to end his life than to keep it. And this is why it takes more courage to live than to kill oneself. However, Camus was very concerned with philosophical suicide, which is what we commit when we do not leave life's fundamental questions open. When we submit to a religion or an ideology, we're shutting off the part of our mind that keeps us thinking and searching, which at the very least is done so in order to achieve some sort of sanctity or security in the cold, dark silence of the universe. Camus says that there isn't a God, for how could he be responsible for creating such a terrible and lonely place? Men use God to answer the questions for them that they could not answer themselves. And if we really are to make the most out of life, despite its indifference, we should spend our time searching for answers instead of doing nothing. Camus reaches the conclusion that the world is absurd because of the tension between man's inclination for clarity, meaning, and justice in a world that's silent. But he says that it's a good thing because we can create our own meaning and pursue what we want to be happy and simply live life, because what else is there to do? I mean, there really isn't anything more. The core of his philosophy stops here, which is supposed to leave the world open to you. I studied Camus very deeply for a couple years, and I was an absurdist. I had felt for a long time that Camus' philosophy had all the answers, despite his answer being that there really isn't one. I read all of his books at least 3 times over, and that is not an exaggeration. So I think I'm in a place to speak on his philosophy and sort of teach it and properly critique it. The irony with Camus is that his entire philosophy is based upon the simple act of questioning and never stopping, but he stops at probably the most important question: why? Camus doesn't bring into question the reason for this contradiction in our existence. He simply accepts it as it is. Man fell from God, and so we have the natural tendency to sin. Because of this, the world is a terrible place. People get rich at the expense of others, and justice seems like only a dream. There's a silence in the universe, and we can't see it. Camus' longing for an answer from anywhere is really a pleading to experience God's essence or to witness it, which we can't. However, we can experience his energies, which would be things like the holy sacraments, justice, and love. Of course, Camus could never hope to witness these things or experience them because he is rejecting their foundation from the very beginning. He was convinced that finding clarity, meaning, and justice in this world was impossible because he rejected the only rational worldview capable of providing that. Camus didn't offer an epistemology, which is pretty problematic when you're making claims as bold as these. Camus has no rational basis for these claims. He's simply just reasoning through his entire argument, which isn't a problem, but when it faces criticism, it is. I followed his philosophy very strongly, and I put it into practice. I can say firsthand that it is the most unfulfilling and depressing way to live and think, ever. I won't sit here and blame Camus for the bad things that have happened to me, but he suggests that everything happens by chance and is entirely out of our control and understanding. This is at minimum the beginning of a concession for a lack of a rational worldview, because how can you know? You can say that we know by reason or rationalism, which assumes autonomous human reason, but it can't justify why logic itself is valid. Empiricism relies on sensory data, but it can't justify the universal laws of logic, math, or morality. Postmodernism, which I think Camus would fall closer under this, denies absolute truth, leading to contradiction, because if all truth is relative, that claim itself is meaningless. Whether by your own process of reasoning or personal experience, you will very quickly realize there needs to be a paradigm in which you can fully account for the possibility of knowledge. God, specifically the Christian paradigm, is the only one that can do this, because it provides the necessary ontological, epistemological, and theological foundations for human cognition. God is the source of all being and truth. All knowledge originates in God, who is an absolute being. Humans are made in the image of God, meaning our rational faculties reflect the divine word, which enables true knowledge. Christ upholds the rational order of creation. The universe is intelligible because it was created through and by divine reason. Christianity teaches that knowledge is not just empirical or rationalistic, but involves the highest faculty of knowing, which would be God. Knowledge is personal, not abstract, since God is personal through the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Knowledge is ultimately a relationship. We know truth by participating in divine life, and if you want some solid evidence for this, the Orthodox Church has countless saints. This shows that knowledge of God is experiential and not theoretical. This worldview proves that truth is rooted in God, and that knowledge is a personal communion with God, and because of Him, we can have a rational worldview. Obviously, with God comes the rejection of absurdism. So there's a 50-50 chance I am either going to start flight school soon to be an airline pilot, or join the merchant marines and work on the cargo ships. Right now I'm just killing time, so that's why I'm making these videos, but this will not last long. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one.